When I was 17, my life changed dramatically. My father was offered a job in another state, and before I could say goodbye properly, we were packing up and leaving. Leaving behind my school, my city, and above all, my friends, was a hard blow to swallow. But despite the distance, we always kept in touch. Edward, Frankie, Mark, and I would make video calls every Sunday night on Facebook, chatting about life, making fun of each other, and keeping alive the friendship we had built up since childhood. "Send it in, bro. What have you got for us?" Mark didn't reply with words. He just sent a file. When I clicked on it, my screen was taken over by a dark and disturbing video. A man lying on a table, with his arms and legs bound. Another guy, wearing a grotesque mask similar to the one in the movie Panic, held a scalpel and began to slowly cut his skin, as if he was skinning an animal. The worst part, the victim was conscious. My stomach churned instantly. I jumped out of my chair, moving away from the screen as if the video could touch me. "What the fuck, Mark?" Edward shouted in the chat. "Where did you find that?" Frankie was also indignant. But I couldn't speak. My eyes were glued to the screen, my breathing became short, and an icy chill ran down my spine. Finally, after a long silence, I could only stammer, "Don't ever show me something like that again." Even so, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a hyper-realistic horror shot. One of those banned movies that circulate on the internet. Because the alternative was simply inconceivable. But Edward insisted, "Really, Mark? Where did you get this?" That's when Mark hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'll tell you. But you have to promise to keep it between us." Absolute silence. Then Edward broke the tension. "Dude, tell me you're not the one who filmed this." "Of course not, you idiots." Mark laughed, trying to lighten the mood. We laughed together, a nervous, uncomfortable laugh. But then, he revealed, "I got it from the deep web." Those words hit me like a bucket of cold water. I'd heard of the deep web, that dark side of the internet where you can find all sorts of illegal things. But I never imagined that someone close to me would have access to it. As if to prove his point, Mark sent another file. This time it was an image. A woman with no arms or legs. Next to the photo, a description that read, "Doll number 30, available for customization before shipping to buyer." My vision blurred. The content was so surreal, so monstrous that my brain refused to process it. "Mark, since when do you look at this kind of thing?" I asked, my voice trembling. He hesitated, but eventually answered, "I don't know. I go in every now and then, just out of curiosity." In the middle of the sentence, a notification interrupted our conversation. "Unknown user has entered the chat." The tension in the call exploded. "Who is that?" I asked, my heart racing. "I have no idea," Mark replied, and for the first time, he looked genuinely scared. My whole body went on alert. "Mark, is that one of your friends from the deep web? If it is, I'm calling the police." I clicked desperately to exit the call, but my mouse didn't respond. The cursor was frozen on the screen. No keys worked. My computer was frozen. Then, the unknown user's camera turned on. The image appeared.
He was a man, but his face was a mask. Not an ordinary mask. It was made of skin. It looked like the disfigured face of a real pig. The silence on the call was sepulchral. "Guys, do you see that?" I whispered. The man in the pig mask moved closer to the camera, as if he was trying to get a better look at us. Then he spoke. "Hello, can you see me?" My blood ran cold. I swallowed. "What do you want from us?" I asked, feeling my voice failing. He laughed, a dry, low laugh, as if he was enjoying our fear. You know that feeling? When something gets boring. The routine, the sameness. I hate it. I need something new, something fresh. Then a sound cut through the darkness of his room. A muffled voice. Crying. The man turned the camera. And that's when I saw it. The woman with no arms or legs. The same one from the photo. She was tied to a chair, her mouth covered in duct tape, her eyes wide in terror. She was struggling, trying to escape an inevitable fate. The man in the pig mask approached her slowly, holding something in his hand. A hammer. My whole body collapsed. "Stop it. I'm calling the police," I screamed, desperate. But he didn't even hesitate. He raised the hammer. I looked away, pressing my eyes shut with my hands, trying to block out any sound. But the noise, the blows, the sound of flesh being crushed, it was too much. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I was going to faint. I felt tears streaming down my face. Then silence. Gradually, I let go of my hands and looked at the screen. The video call was empty. The man in the pig mask was gone. My mind was spinning. Had I imagined the whole thing? But then I looked at the chat. "Friends, please tell me you saw this too." The answers came quickly. "Yes. My screen crashed too. What just happened?" But no one wanted to talk about it again. It was as if, by not mentioning it, we could pretend it never happened. Only, the images never left my head. To this day, I sometimes dream about that video, the man in the pig mask, and every time I do, I wake up the same way I did that night, in a cold sweat, shaking, and with my heart about to explode. But the worst thing, every time I open my eyes, I have the terrible feeling that he's still watching me.
What I am about to reveal haunts me every night. I have no pride in what I did, and every memory weighs on me like a rock that is impossible to remove. A few years ago, I was the victim of a financial scam that left me penniless. Deep in debt and despair, I looked for any opportunity to recover what I had lost. It was in this vulnerable state that I ended up crossing paths with a clandestine scheme that operated beyond the limits of the law. Although I feel guilty for everything I witnessed and for the role I played, I know that nothing can justify what happened. Until then, my life was ordinary. I worked as a nurse in a public hospital and led a simple routine. My salary covered my basic expenses, and I never imagined that one mistake could change everything. My downfall began when a colleague insisted that I invest my savings in a promising business that promised high returns in a short period of time. I was deceived and lost everything. With no way out, I started accepting extra shifts and any job that came my way, in an attempt to get back on my feet. It was at this time that I met an enigmatic doctor. He had an impressive resume and had worked in the best hospitals in the country, but mysteriously decided to trade everything to work in a declining public hospital. No one understood his decision, but no one dared to question him. One day, to my surprise, he invited me to talk. I accepted his invitation to lunch, and it was during this meeting that he began to ask me strange questions. He wanted to know about my financial situation and how much I would need to never worry about money again. When I gave him an amount, he smiled and said he could pay me 3 times that amount. His tone was serious, almost threatening. Desperation got the better of me, and I agreed to listen to him. He told me that he worked with a group of professionals at the hospital and that they needed someone trustworthy to help them with a secret operation. The scheme involved newborn babies. When one was stillborn, the documentation was manipulated so that another baby, born healthy, would be registered as dead. While the parents were being deceived, the baby was taken out of the hospital and delivered to a black pickup truck that was always waiting in the back. My job would be to ensure that the records were adjusted without raising suspicion. My body froze when I heard that. I wanted to ask what happened to these children, but I couldn't. I was caught up in the moment, terrified and hypnotized at the same time. I knew I should refuse, but the financial offer was too tempting for someone who could no longer see any other way out. The first day I participated, I was consumed by regret. My stomach churned, and I felt like vomiting. But then the doctor handed me an unexpected sum of money. Guilt gave way to momentary relief. The money became an anesthetic for my conscience. The scheme lasted until one day, everything fell apart. As I was leaving the hospital wing to make another delivery, I heard gunshots. The truck sped off, and before I could understand what was happening, I was surrounded by unknown men. They dragged me into a car and covered my eyes. I spent hours not knowing where I was being taken. When the blindfold was removed, I discovered that I was in the custody of a secret task force. I was given two options: cooperate or face the consequences alone. There was no real choice. I knew that if I refused, my fate would be sealed in the worst way. I provided information that helped arrest part of the group, but the organization was too big, and only a small part of it was taken down. Today, I am under protection, but I know there is no safe haven enough to hide forever. The past always finds a way to catch up with us, and I know that at some point my price will be exacted.
Livia and I met in high school. From the very first moment, we connected in an inexplicable way. It didn't take long for us to start dating, and as the years went by, our relationship grew even stronger. For 5 years, we never went a single day without seeing each other. We even chose the same college major, just so we could be together as long as possible. I know it may seem like an exaggeration. For some, it might even be suffocating, but for us, it was perfect. 2 years ago, we decided it was time to take a bigger step, getting married. But like any young couple, we had a huge problem ahead of us: money. I wanted something simple and intimate, but Livia dreamed of a big ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. We were saving as best we could, but our jobs didn't pay that well. Then an opportunity arose. A South Korean company offered Livia a 4-month temporary contract. The salary was excellent, enough to cover almost all the wedding costs, but there was one catch. She would have to move to Seoul during that period, 4 months apart. Since we met, we had never spent so much time apart. The idea of seeing her leave made me uneasy, but deep down, I knew it was the best thing for our future, so I swallowed my fear and encouraged her to accept. The day before the trip, I remember feeling a tightness in my chest, a bad feeling. Something inside me was screaming to stop her from going, but how could I justify that? Stay because I have a bad feeling. It sounded irrational, so we said goodbye at the airport, and she left. In the early days, we tried to maintain our routine. We made video calls whenever we could. The time difference was a challenge, but we managed. Then Livia mentioned that she had made a new friend at work, a Brazilian woman named Yumi. To make life easier, the two decided to share an apartment. That put me at ease a little. At least she wouldn't be alone in a strange country. One night, she told me that the company was organizing a costume party and that she was excited to go with Yumi. I didn't see anything wrong with that. After all, after so much work, she deserved to have fun. That night, as usual, I stayed up late so we could talk after the party, but she didn't answer. I waited a little longer. I called again, and nothing. My heart started racing. I checked her social media and saw that she had posted some photos from the party, and that's when I felt a chill run down my spine. In the background of the photos, among the masked people, there was someone different. A man wearing a samurai mask. In the first photo, he was standing still. In the second, he was closer. In the third, he was right behind them, looking directly at the camera. It was just a costume guest, right? That's what I tried to convince myself. But an irrational fear took hold of me. Something was wrong. Very wrong. To try to distract myself, I joined a Facebook group called Expats in Korea, where foreigners shared their experiences in the country. At the top of the feed, there was a pinned post. If you're thinking about living in Korea, check this out first. Below the text, there is a link. I thought about ignoring it, but something made me click. The video started in low quality. At first, it looked like one of those bizarre content that circulates on the internet, but then the scene became clear. A woman was tied by her wrists to a chain on the ceiling. She was naked, and on her face was a white mask with a single word written on it. Bitch. My breath caught. Suddenly, a masked man entered the scene, the same samurai mask from the photo. The woman began to cry, begging for her life. He looked directly at the camera, made a salute gesture, and, with a single blow of his katana, cut her in half. A complete silence filled my room. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. Then the screen went black, and a new image appeared. It was a handwritten piece of paper. "Wanna play?" My heart raced. I picked up my phone and called Livia. Once, twice, 10 times. Nothing. I called Yumi. Nothing. My fingers trembled as I reviewed the photos from the party, and there he was, the man in the samurai mask. I couldn't breathe anymore. Then, suddenly my phone rang. A video call from Livia. I answered it right away. The image loaded. My blood ran cold. Livia and Yumi were kneeling, their hands tied behind their backs, wearing the same white mask as the woman in the video. Behind them, the man in the mask held his katana. I started screaming, "Leave them alone. I'll do whatever you want." He didn't answer. He just held up a new piece of paper. $2,000. 10 minutes. Or it will be 4. My fingers barely responded, but I started transferring the money. In the background, Livia was crying softly. I managed to make the transaction. I showed him the receipt. Then he held up another sheet of paper. "If you call the police, she'll die." And he hung up. I tried calling again, sending messages. Nothing. The first day passed. The second. The third. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. My mind was in tatters. Until, on the 4th day, someone knocked on my door. I opened it. It was Livia. She was pale. Her eyes were sunken, swollen, but alive. I hugged her like I'd never hugged her before. I tried to ask her what happened, where they took her, how she managed to get back, but she never answered. Whenever I bring it up, she stays silent. 6 years have passed. We got married. We had children. We moved on with our lives. But to this day, I wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat with only one image in my mind. The man in the samurai mask, looking at me, waiting.